Hi, everyone, and welcome again to GetHimSpiz22.com, Podbean podcast, and YouTube video. I am Dr. Larry Chapp. Just a bit of house cleaning here. I got literally about six emails the other day after my last podcast where people are saying, how come you don't do any fancy intro music or something like that? I'll tell you why, because I'd rather gouge out my eyes with knitting needles than have fancy intro music. That's why I can't stand YouTube videos and stuff that just don't get right to the point. So we're getting right to the point. Today
Amen.
I have Mr. Marco Casanova. He is associate director of an organization I had never heard of before, but it was brought to my attention, and it is called Desert Stream Ministries.
Exactly.
And it was brought to my attention after I wrote an article in Catholic World Report, dealing or National Catholic Register, one or the other, where I was comparing the contrasting approaches to outreach to homosexuals between Father Martin's outreach ministry, and the ministry, the traditional one, Courage. And obviously, I favor Courage over Father Martin. But then somebody wrote to me and said, well, you got to talk to this fellow, Marco Casanova, works with Desert Stream. So, Marco, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Larry Chapp. What an honor to be with you. So thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you. And I see you are living in Missouri. Is that correct?
I'm living in Missouri.
Missouri,
Yeah.
or is it
I'm in
Missouri?
Missouri. That's right. Are you a native? That sounds like you're
No, I grew up in Nebraska. So we
okay.
are very familiar with Missouri.
Exactly. So my wife and I live here
That's
in
where we go to get our fireworks and our meth. So there you go.
Oh, Kansas City proud. What can I say? So my wife and
Yeah.
I are live here in Kansas City, is where Desert Stream is headquartered. My wife is originally from Krakow, Poland.
Oh,
So
wow.
she moved here when we got married. I'm originally from Texas, but we're here because of my work with Desert Stream. So
Well, my father's lineage stretches back to Krakow, Poland. I'm half Polish, and my ancestors came from in and around, not Krakow itself, but in and around Krakow. So maybe I'm distantly related to your wife. Who the heck
hey,
knows?
wouldn't that be great?
You know,
Thanksgiving dinner. Let's go.
about 50 degrees of separation. Anyway, tell us about what is Desert Stream Ministries?
Yeah, so Desert Stream Ministries, it was founded the same year that Father John Harvey founded Courage. And it was founded in the Vineyard Protestant Evangelical Movement by a gentleman named Andrew Comiskey. And so he wanted to start gathering with men who were struggling with same sex attraction. He was prompted by his pastor, Ken Gullickson, John Wimber, to start gathering for the sake of just discipleship building around these areas and seeking healing from the Lord. That much like John Harvey, we believed that there was psychological stuff behind same-sex attraction. And so Living Waters, not pretending to be a therapeutic group, but a group that gathers unto helping people become more integrated in their sexuality. Well, that broadened over the years. It wasn't just men coming out of SSA, but now men and women. And then, sort of years after that, it became just even more broad, of just sexual and relational brokenness in general. Andrew Comiskey became a Catholic about 15 years ago. He was given a copy of the Theology of the Body by a Christopher West. And it was there that he started just really feasting on these truths of what it means to be human. It really converted him to Catholicism. And so now we've really imbued our program. The program that we do is called Living Waters, done in Catholic and Protestant churches throughout the world. And it's really what Christopher West calls the pastoral application of the theology of the body. So it's helping men and women with various starting points of sexual and relational brokenness, wanting to take major steps in chastity. So that's what we do. I oversee the Living Waters groups in the United States. And yeah, happy to be on the team here at Desert Stream.
So the entire United States, you're like the grand poobah of Living Waters for the entire United
Yeah,
States.
well, that's that sounds so grand. I realize that as you mirrored that back to me.
But
But
that's
because
fine.
we've only have like 30 groups in the United States, so let's be real, folks.
So, okay, there's so much to unpack here. First off, I've just learned something new. I looked it up online and stuff. I kind of got a sense of it, but I didn't realize that it's the same age as the Courage ministry, which means it's been around for a while. I was sort of under the impression that it was kind of a new thing, and it's not. It's been around for a while, but maybe I hadn't heard from about it because it was first primarily within evangelical Protestant circles. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. I mean, we've always been an ecumenical reality from the beginning, but I dare say once Andrew became a Catholic, it truly started becoming ecumenical, where people, especially of the Catholic world, wanted to get this group in their own churches, in their own parishes. I mean, I would say even now, I mean, 15 years since Andrew became a Catholic, we're still largely evangelical. Moving in the Catholic world is just kind of a hard movement. You know, it's a slower pace, but we have robust groups, a few in the United States that are run in Catholic churches, and then I would say Living Waters Poland is probably one of our most robust expressions internationally, and of course that's all Catholic. So.
Okay, so you say it began the same year that John Harvey started Courage. By the way, as people know, I was good friends with Father Harvey. He
Oh,
lived at DeSales University, where I taught for 20
oh,
years.
sure.
He was an oblate of St. Francis de Sales, the order that ran de Sales. Now, Father Harvey was frequently gone from de Sales, traveling all over the world. But whenever he was there, we'd always run into each other, and he was always such a gracious guy. But anyway, the reason why I bring him up is because I want to ask, is it mere coincidence that Mr. Comiskey started Desert Stream at the same year as Father Harvey, or was there some sort of mutual cooperation between the two of them?
You know, I think they were I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's providence, but it wasn't there wasn't a collaboration at the beginning.
Okay.
So it really was, you know, these two men who were making a way for people in both Catholic and evangelical circles. I would say that they were both had admiration for each other. So Andrew was close with Father John Harvey, would visit him, kind of get some wisdom from him. So we love Courage. I mean, we've been so gracious, so indebted to Courage, truly, because they're really the custodians of a solid anthropology when it comes to these areas of sexual brokenness. And so we honor Courage at Desert Stream. We're different than them in our praxis, but I would say we're kin. We're very close in that
Okay,
regard.
good. Because you sort of anticipated my next question, which is okay, we've got these parallel ministries.
Mhm.
One started explicitly Catholic, one started in a more Protestant milieu, but nevertheless started the same year, oriented towards the homosexual community. My question would be, how do they differ?
Yeah.
Or do they differ? Or is it pretty much the same thing or not? So maybe you could unpack that a little bit.
Absolutely. So a few things. I would say that the Living Waters groups are always run by laymen and women. So it's not so priest centric as Courage could be in some cases. I would say two Living Waters groups, there is a heterogeneity to the brokennesses that are presented at Living Waters. So it's not just about same-sex attraction. It's about victims coming out of sexual abuse or sexual addiction or marital struggle, the whole spectrum of sexual and relational brokenness. We find that the heterogeneity actually breaks a sort of isolationism where people think, well, my problem, my expressed issue is very unique and almost insurmountable in its uniqueness. And we would say, oh wait, I mean the wounds may be similar, the symptoms may be slightly different, but there's level ground at the cross. And so that's where we would differ, I think, in the priest centric aspect, and then the heterogeneity of the groups.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I do know Courage, for example, is very sacramentally focused. All right, they're going to have a strong emphasis on the sacrament of reconciliation, confession, and then an emphasis on the Eucharist and the development of certain Catholic piety practice, devotional practices, rosaries, and those sorts of things. But that then leads me into the question with regard to your ministry. What I know that it now has a more Catholic orientation since the conversion of the founder. But what are some of the spiritual pillars that you guys lean on as you counsel people in their woundedness and their brokenness, and you try to, in a sense, as I saw on your webpage, to in a sense restore wholeness, restore integrity? What are
Yeah.
the spiritual practices that you try to lean on?
I think one thing that we want to do at Desert Stream Living Waters is reclaim the word chastity as laid out to us in the Catechism. We think it's the most robust expression to use in this arena of what's our goal? What are we going towards? I think in the church it's so confusing. This word accompaniment is thrown out, but it's like accompaniment to where? Like where are we going? Is it
Yeah.
accompaniment to nowhere? So we would say the goal is chastity. So what does that mean? Well, obviously, chastity is so dynamic. It can't just be expressed in one sort of sentence. There's a lot that goes into it. But what the Catechism speaks of, which I love, is it's about stepping into what it means to be an image bearer as a man for woman, woman for man, and on every level of our being. So it's not just steering clear of mortal sin, although that's an important aspect of it, but it's about becoming. So we love the language of John Paul II, becoming, the language of gift, of stepping into our gift. So those would be some of the pillars. I would say the major pillar is chastity, if you will, and then the thinking of John Paul II in the language of gift. I would also say that our Protestant roots, especially the John Wimber roots of really believing the kingdom of God to help us to transform our lives. I would say as Catholics, if we believe in transubstantiation, we believe that the Spirit of God comes and helps us become chaste. He doesn't just call us to it, he actually helps us. And so another pillar would to believe God for help to become chaste, especially in these deep areas where it's like, whoa, I have a stronghold of homosexual temptation, or I have deep, deep abuse wounds that are going to take a long time to navigate and to bring into the light of trusted community. So it's messy work, but we think that those pillars, chastity, John Paul II, the kingdom come, really help us navigate those areas with care, but also with a lot of faith that God can help us in these areas.
That's interesting. Uh, so you've got these. Have you ever? I'm a million thoughts going through my head. So pardon me for a second. But have you ever read Bishop Varden's book Chastity? It's a small little book.
Of course, my boss and I are just finishing that remarkable book by Bishop Eric Varden. It's amazing.
Yeah, I boy,
And
I
next week
recommend
we're
it to
finishing it. We're
everybody.
kind of yeah, I recommend it too. I think it's oh my gosh, the way he goes into it's really honestly so he's so sophisticated in the way he
Yeah.
writes and brings in so many cultural so much cultural relevance with art and opera, and it's just incredible. But yeah, it's totally worth a read.
Well, what made me think of it too was as you were describing your organization's commitment to a really deep sense of what chastity means. It just struck me that the great thing about Bishop Barden's book is that he says, look, essentially this sort of white knuckled
Mm.
ascetical chastity where you're trying to avoid evil it's not going to work. It just doesn't work. There has to be a deep and profound and fundamental orientation to something you truly desire as good. It
Yeah.
has to be some positive orientation towards which that you are drawn. And so he embeds chastity in like you said, an opera and this higher vision, come up higher, this higher vision of human life, and not just, oh, don't do that with your naughty bits.
Yes, exactly. That's what I love about his book. I also think too, what I was really observing from his book, what I was hearing from his book, was that you can work on chastity now. Like it's not, oh, we have to wait until we're unified with God in the kingdom of heaven. But there is something about working it out now. He has this kind of beautiful analysis on fasting. I mean, just so many aspects of it that we
Yeah,
can really train ourselves to honor not only our own bodies but others as well, and become fully robust in our sexual beings, not sort of like you said, like constantly scrupulous about how am I going sideways. It's like, wait a minute, God
yeah.
is giving us a grace to actually come into full maturity in these sexual selves.
I like how you said, going sideways, because that's usually what happens when you simply pursue a purely, strictly ascetical model. You don't really progress in the spiritual life. It's just kind of, you're doing little dodgy things.
Yeah,
You're constantly going sideways. You try not to go backwards. So you're going sideways, but you're never going forward because there's no positive proposal. But
exactly.
along those lines, do you guys deal at all with people who are wounded by pornography addiction?
Absolutely. Yep. So I would say most of the people who go through Living Waters, most of the men, some of the women increasingly, but most of the men do struggle with pornography addiction. I would say about 25% of people who go through Living Waters struggle with SSA, but most are kind of your normal pedestrian felons.
Yeah, and and I'm glad you do that. I know a priest in the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania, my old diocese, Father Alan Hoffa, who has a ministry now and outreach towards those afflicted with a pornography addiction, which is, in my opinion, one of the great, as you well know, one of the great silent addictions of our time.
Right.
It seems like the powers that be everywhere in our society don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address the issue, probably because most of them are also porn addicted. is
Yeah.
my theory. Is my theory. It's
Oh,
the
and
great.
I'm
It's
sorry.
no. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that is the common thread I find in a lot of the people that we work with. It's scrambled. It has scrambled our capacity to see ourselves as gift, to see the others as gift.
Yes.
So really sort of training ourselves to let go of that addiction, and it's hard work, and actually to see ourselves aright, to see reality, capital R,
Yeah. Yeah.
is so important. So the porn thing, yeah, major thing these
And
days.
the psychological studies that are out there are just damning. It is a
Mhm.
public health crisis. It does affect children. It affects adolescents in particular in very deleterious ways. And therefore, in my opinion, and this is a rabbit hole we're not going to go down, but in my opinion, of course, it should be criminalized. It should be
Mhm.
illegal
Mhm.
as a public health measure. It should
Yeah.
be illegal. But of course, in our country, it isn't.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about it as a public health crisis. So it leans then on organizations such as yours to come in and clean up the mess.
Amen. And it's messy work. I think that's why the work of, let's say like a James Martin or even like kind of gay Christian movements that are taking ground in the church today, they're a little sort of very surface level, just kind of accept your gay self. If you're James Martin, it's like accept your gay self and you can sort of do whatever you want with that. Maybe the other benign expressions of gay Christian movements are like accept your gay self but don't do the dirty deed type of thing. I
Yeah.
think I think it necessitates the deep, messy work of healing. I think it does.
Yeah.
Um, I dare say that our work is it's so unique because I don't think anybody else is really doing what we're doing because it's messy. It's hard work. It's hard work to say, no, we're gonna walk with you. We're actually going to accompany you into those areas where you're starting to mine the meaning of same-sex attraction. What does it mean? It has psychological meaning. Why do I tend to eroticize the same sex and heighten moments of vulnerability? All of those things so important for the journey of chastity. But that's messy work in the fits and starts of our human condition. So Living Waters was so transformative for me personally. I really found so much liberation in being able to go subterranean, so to speak, and be able to look at these areas with helpful, truthful guides, and able to make major steps that I never thought were possible in chastity. So grateful, really grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for a lot of people that have gone, from being broken to being more holistically integrated, when they look back, they realize, wow, what they begin to realize is just how wounded they actually were. I mean, obviously, like in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the first steps is getting people to admit, hey, I have a problem. My name is Larry and I am an alcoholic, sort of a thing, self acknowledgement. And so it would seem to me, and I'm just throwing this out there to you to comment on, that perhaps one of the very first things that you need to do is to get people who are wounded in these ways to actually acknowledge the depth of their wound. If they're coming to you, then it means that they are aware that there's a problem, but maybe they're not aware as to how deep the problem is. And
Right.
is that sort of, you don't want to begin with a negative, but perhaps part of your task is getting them to see, man, I really am profoundly wounded in really radical ways.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think so. For example, my wife and I run a living waters group in our parish. About 20 young people. The average age is 29, pretty young. And I would say they all have a spirit, a grace of desperation. Like I need help in these areas. And like you said, I may not know the profundity of them. I don't know the sort of all of the ways in which I need the help, but I do know that these are the expressed issues. My same-sex attraction. I'm acting out homosexually on dating apps and I want to stop, or I can't let go of pornography, or I'm totally allergic to any sort of relationship with someone of the opposite sex. And I want to bring that to the Lord because I have a deep desire to be married. But how can I even do that if I'm even disgusted by the idea of it? All of these things,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
starting points of the unchastity, so to speak. And this is where I think the work of the Holy Spirit is so important, where we don't really know. Like we have helpful guides psychologically, helpful guides spiritually, but it's like a real work of the Holy Spirit to say, "Come, Lord, I don't even know the depth of this, but you can help me navigate it in a very precise but gentle way." And Jesus does that in these groups. It's slow, it's confident, it's come Holy Spirit, so there's a freedom, there's a deep anthropology, but there's also a freedom of God. I haven't arrived there yet, and I need your help to do that. So come, Holy Spirit, help
yeah.
me here. So yeah, exactly what you're saying.
So I would imagine then too that um, one of the problems that you have to negotiate in your ministry is uh, a sense of futility and despair that sets in
Mm.
because you're dealing with people of a profound woundedness in the sexual domain. There has to be a very high recidivism rate, right?
Mhm.
People constantly falling, starting again, falling, starting again, falling. Like I go to confession, I say the same sins almost every time. I forgive me, Father, road rage 800 times. Forgive me, Father, I shouted at people at the grocery store. Yeah, my great sin is annoyance, temper,
Sure.
easily impatience, those sorts of things. All right, and I'm sometimes tempted to despair
Mm.
because it's so deeply ingrained in my personality. And I've gotten better as I've gotten older. And yet, every single time I go to confession, it's like, "Oh Lord, I beseech thee, take my impatience away," and sometimes I'm just tempted to say to myself, "Oh, to heck with it. It's who you are." All
Mm.
right. People just need to roll with it and stop confessing it like some scrupulous old man toad who just can't get over his super ego guilt over things. Stop treating confession like it's just some sort of cathartic ablution so you can go back to do it again. So, in other words, there was that kind of psychology, spiritual psychology and recidivism, then probably is on steroids with people who are dealing with sexual woundedness, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think we deal with a certain level of scrupulosity, of course, in these issues. We also deal with a sort of familiar sloth, where there is just kind of this worldly sorrow of like, oh my gosh, my life is so hard because I have to overcome this ailment or this
Yeah.
affliction. And so this is where, Thomas Aquinas really helps us in our Living Waters groups, I would say, in his idea of magnanimity as the sort of the virtue to combat the vice of acedia, of sloth. And really saying, well, Lord, I'm going to remain grateful, and I'm going to bring this familiar sorrow, this familiar worldly sorrow to my group. And this is where the group work is so important. It's like, hey guys, I'm not doing well. Like I'm kind of in this slump of my life is never going to change and I'm going to be constantly addicted, let's say, or constantly just in frustration because of my same-sex desires or whatever the case might be. And this is where I think the power of the confessional, of course, this isn't sacramental confession, but the group, the power of the group knowing where you're at and having brothers or sisters fighting for you and praying for you is so powerful. And then what I think Living Waters trains us to do is keep speaking it out until you're through it. So I reserve the right to say, hey, I'm still vulnerable in weak moments and I need to speak this out. I have mixed motivations to persons at times, or I'm lustful after this person, or I fell into pornography here, or whatever the case is for them. Being able to say,
Mhm.
bring it to the light. Yes, to the priest, but the priest is maxed out. He's not going to accompany you out of your sexual patterns, your illicit sexual patterns. But you need the community, you need the church, you need the ecclesia to like help you sort of work these
Yeah.
things out. And hopefully, Living Waters is a little microcosm of that for people.
So how large is your organization?
So we have about 7 full-time people on staff here. We're headquartered in Kansas City, and we have groups all around the country. About 30 right now. We've we we're not the most popular ministry right now, frankly. So we really are. I'm gearing up, trying to get more groups here in the United States, but we also have wonderful expressions in India, in Poland, in France. So we're worldwide, and I would say the international expressions are pretty encouraging. I would say right now the USA not so much, for reasons that I think aren't surprising. Our culture is going through a lot right now.
Yeah.
Homosexuality is a hot button issue, and there's many camps of people who have varying degrees of opinions about the healing of those issues and whatnot. So yeah, we're up against a lot of backlash, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense because in the dominant culture, if you have a homosexual orientation, there's nothing to be healed from there.
Yeah.
That is the, in and of itself a natural desire, one of the simple variations in human sexual orientation, and that the statement that there's something fundamentally non-integral, non-whole, non-human about it, or something wrong with it, is something that is utterly and completely rejected by our culture. Love is love and all that. And then, of course, to say, therefore, that the sexual expression of that orientation in genital acts is sinful drives them just right over the cliff of into rage and anger. I mean, so it becomes a point where, and I say this as someone who taught theology university, and as soon as you touch this issue, and
Mm.
as soon as you take the position that you and I take, that's the reaction that you get. You're not just wrong; you are a horrible, terrible human being. You're an evil human being. You are driving people to suicide. You are causing them to suppress their true selves and to invent and concoct some spiritual ideological self that doesn't need to be so. I'm trying to steel man this rage that they have in
Mhm.
order for my guests and listeners to understand what you're probably up against,
Yeah.
Marco.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. I think a real there's a real reaction to any idea of resolution deeper in these issues, that, oh my gosh, there's no such thing as a gay person. I mean, can we just sort of just
Yeah.
say that, we have people who struggle with SSA. This is why I love Courage. I think Courage has been a champion of this type of language in the Catholic world. So I'm so grateful for that. But for us to have those presuppositions of, well, I'm just a gay man, or this is natural to me, it skews reality. It skews the chastity. It skews
Yeah.
how someone is going to take steps. I dare say it stifles them in their becoming. It doesn't help them. It doesn't do them a service. There's some kind of pockets in the Catholic world now who are saying, well, just kind of let them be queer, like a queer Catholic or a gay Catholic, and they won't act out sexually. So they're not doing the dirty deeds, but that's kind of who they are, maybe secondarily or tertiary. It's like, that's so confusing. Can we
Yeah.
just kind of go back to the basics of saying, hey, I'm a dude who's struggling with some conflictual desires. I know that's not who I am, but in weaker moments, it feels very powerful and compelling. I need help. And
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
started there, I think we'd be able to get people on a good track of becoming. And that it's not like, oh, it only works for some, not for others. Like, no, this is who you are. Become what you are. What John Paul II would say, become what you
Yeah.
are.
This
Jesus
is
help.
such a
Yeah.
yeah, such a great point because unless our ministry as Christians to people of various sexual woundedness or orientations, unless it's grounded in a proper anthropology. And I'm glad you brought up I've never been a huge fan of Christopher West, but I am a big fan of the theology of the body in general. But if Chris West has helped you guys, then more power to Chris West. I've met him a few times. I actually knew his sister quite well, taught her at DeSales, and so
Oh,
on. So
nice.
anyway, I'm not anti Chris West, although I have some issues with him because some people out there might be wondering about that. But the theology of the body is really something good, something positive. And so the fact is that unless we ground it in a proper anthropology, all we're left with then is, what do we do with all these feelings that people have, and they're powerful feelings, and it seems to be what we have to overcome, in other words, is that this really is, same-sex attraction really does equate to an identity. It's
Right.
who I am. It defines me. I'm not this person, sister and brother to this. I'm just this gay man. That's
Mhm.
who. And this is what I've noticed in so many of my interactions with my gay friends, gay acquaintances, is that the gay identifier becomes all consuming in a
Mm.
way that the heterosexual qualifier does not. I mean,
Yeah.
the very first thing that I would think when someone says, "Tell me about yourself," at a dinner party, I wouldn't say, "Well, I'm a cisgendered straight dude." No, that's not going to come out of my mouth. I'm going to say, "Boy from Nebraska. I did this. I love football and fishing and
Hey.
theology, blah blah blah." And the idea of my sexual identity,
Mm.
I'm not even certain I have one. I don't even know what it is. It's just like, wait, what? My sexual identity, sexual? I don't know. Ask a different question. And so this is, I think, what we're in a sense in going after this issue. We have to simply go deeper than, well, on the one hand, it's a sin, or on the other hand, no, it's not. It's just who they are. We really have to go much deeper into a fundamental anthropological sort of revolution in our thinking.
I agree. And I think that's where John Paul II is really helpful. I mean, the primary sources of his writings on the theology of the body are just incredible, especially as it relates to the language of orientation. I think we need to reclaim that language. I know we use it psychologically to where, oh, if someone has homosexual inclinations and they have a homosexual orientation. But when you read John Paul II, the orientation is very, very at core who he is for her and she is for him. So the orientation of man, according to JP2, is to dignify her, and the orientation of her is to dignify him. I like that.
Yes.
I like
Yes.
that because I think our body speaks of that. Our anatomy speaks of that. The masculine anatomy, the masculine frame speaks of initiative. The woman's frame speaks of receptivity. All of that emblematic of our nature. And so going back to those original anthropological points, I think are so important in our pastoral praxis. But I think what we fear today is, okay, that's all heavy handed and let's not go there with people. So our pastoral praxis becomes to get a little muddied with the queering of Christianity to where it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
minute, this isn't, we're missing the roots here. We're missing the main point. John Paul, this JP2 didn't write a TOB for the LGBT. There's not
No.
like another nature, So we have to be very careful in our pastoral praxis because if it doesn't reflect our anthropological depths, I dare say it's just dangerous. It's a dangerous practice. No matter how benign it may seem, it leads people to real confusion in their sexual becoming.
Yeah. I just had on my show too a few days ago the wonderful Abigail Favale,
Oh yeah.
who's written on transgenderism and the question
It's
of
great.
gender from a Catholic perspective. But one of the things she pointed out, when we were discussing theology of the body, was that once you turn your focus away from the aspect of generativity
Mm.
that is so central to basically our what our biological bodies are sacramentally telling us, phenomenologically telling us, iconically telling us in their orientations, is that, the baseline in our understanding of our sexuality is that it's fundamentally and ultimately oriented in generativity.
Yeah.
And generativity in both the procreational physical sense of having babies, but also even in celibacy, right? The idea behind the celibate isn't oh, well, sex is dirty and I'm going to give it up and I'm going to make myself holier. No, it's to take the natural sign of human generativity in the physical sense, to raise it up eschatologically with Mary as the sort of model is a kind of higher generativity. Why we call a priest father, and a mother superior mother, and so on. And it seems to me that even in dealing with people with same-sex attraction, it would have to be one of the avenues for getting people to see why it is that my inclinations to want to be with someone of my own sex is off kilter. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not in that generative iconic aspect of things.
Exactly. A little bit about my story that I think hits this celibacy piece. I was in the seminary at St. Charles Borromeo in Philadelphia, not
Oh
far
my
from
god,
here now.
my wife's a dean there.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So I
she's
was there
dean.
from
Yeah, go.
2010 to 2019. So I was there for about 8.5 years. I postponed diaconate ordination for exactly what you're speaking of. So halfway through the seminary, the great Archbishop Chapp came to Philly, and he instituted the Perpetuitic year, which included like
Yeah.
a 30-day silent retreat, all this. And up to this point, I was living really duplicitously, addicted to pornography, acting out homosexually outside of the seminary, really, really losing a sense of myself in this sort of keeping the same sex attraction in the dark. And that Perpetuitic year really, really changed my life. It really made me a Christian in many ways on those deeper levels. And I postponed diaconate ordination. Started doing a lot of work with formation and becoming more chaste, kicking pornography, not acting out homosexually again, like really getting to a point of being clear in my sort of moral activity. But I realized I was reading John Paul II then about celibacy in the Theology of the Body, and he speaks about how being a celibate for the kingdom of God necessitates a renunciation of the good of marriage for the sake of the kingdom. And I realized I couldn't renounce the good of something I didn't even want. I didn't want marriage. I was like,
Yeah.
I can't even think about that. And in my prayer, in good direction from good priests with Chapu and others, they were like, well, the Lord's probably doing more work in your heart. You're not ready. You're not ready to give yourself renouncing the good of marriage. You can't just be a celibate because it's like, well, I'm quote unquote gay, immutably so. So therefore, this is the best option. I mean, I think the priesthood is much better than that. So I thought
Yeah.
I need more healing in my life. I need to look at this and really probe this and ask the good hard questions. And this is how I got in touch with Desert Stream. And that's what really catapulted me into more healing and really discovering like, wow, I can be a man for woman, and eventually met my wife in Wadowice of all places. But that's a lot in one little snippet. But I
You met her
think
at Wadowice, where
I
John Paul was
did.
born.
Yeah, exactly. I was doing a Living Waters conference there in Wadowice, and she was attending. She was Krakow. She was living in Krakow, and we met. We got married in Wadowice. I mean, kind of an amazing. It's too much. It sounds like a Hallmark movie, but I promise I'm not making it up. But like, I feel like John Paul II has really been such a catalyst for both of us. My wife comes out of a sexual abuse background. She was in Living Waters for reasons different than mine, but we were both broken. And Living Waters, theology of the body, gave us a common lexicon to understand each other and to
Wow.
actually grow to know and appreciate and love each other. And I feel like John Paul II gave us a way forward through Andrew Comiskey, who has been the mastermind behind this whole Living Waters thing. So I love this work. I think it actually is transformative. And it's not like this weird conversion therapy jargon stuff that people hop on it. It's good TOB activated in the kingdom of God. So
Yeah, yeah. And oh gosh, I'm glad you got into your story here. I didn't know your story, and I obviously didn't want to pry into your story. So I'm glad you sort of, but you can see the passion come out of you now when you're talking about this, and it's interesting. I mean, I was in seminary too. I went to the others Orthodox seminary. I went to Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg,
oh,
Maryland.
nice. Great.
And, so we obviously knew guys in St. Charles Borromeo. Like I said, my wife is dean there now and so on. But I actually deeply desired to get married the whole time I was in seminary. I did want to get married, and that's eventually why I did leave. And it's interesting. The whole time I was there, I was fed by my spiritual director this line that, well, unless you can desire and understand the good of being a real father in the physical
Mm.
sense with a real wife, then you shouldn't be a priest, because you should desire those things in order to be able to become, a priest. And that persuaded me for a long time. Yeah, yeah. I want the more I wanted to get married, the more I was sort of told that's a sign that you should be a priest. Until one day I realized, uh,
I'm
I
kind of
want to get
frustrated
married.
by this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, this ain't working no more. I want to get married.
Well, I'm glad
Okay.
you left, Larry. I'm glad you left.
Well, yeah, I'm glad because I probably would have been a really, really awful priest. I don't
Oh,
know.
me too, brother. Me too.
I probably would have been a very good homilist because I have kissed the Blarney Stone and I can talk some talk. Okay. But little things like
Yeah.
we need to re asphalt the parking lot out there. And I would
Exactly.
say, how the hell do I care about that? What?
Exactly.
I'm now responsible for asphalt and parking lot? No, thank you.
I could
You
barely
know,
mow my lawn. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So,
yeah. So the practical side of being a parish priest would have utterly any parish I would have been in charge of would have been bankrupt within 6 months due to inattention from me, like to handle it, somebody else deal with it. So anyway,
I'm so
we're
glad the Lord. No, I'm so grateful for the priest. I'm so grateful for the seminary. That St. Charles was really good in terms
yeah,
of
me too.
forming me, walking with me, really walking with me in those really difficult, messy places. A shout out to St. Charles Overbrook. They did an amazing job in helping me, but also helping me catapult onto more because I wasn't ready for the priesthood. And I'm glad I had to do more thinking because I wouldn't be married. And yeah, just grateful for that.
Yeah, and that is you hit upon something that I think is very important to return it to sort of our main theme here, which is you were leading for a while anyway, pre-conversion, if you will, a duplicitous life.
Mm,
And I think this one of the things that the sex abuse scandal has taught us is the extent to which people can appear outwardly perfectly normal
mm,
while being sexual abusers.
mm.
Because there is, and you know this, there is this unbelievable ability of sexual sinners to compartmentalize their sexual sin, to
For sure.
cordon it off, and to therefore hide it.
Mhm.
It's a strange thing about our sexuality that it both pervades us and is important, but also something that we're perfectly capable of just sort of setting over here and saying, well, that's not really who I am, and hiding it. So to me, this is one of the bad aspects, and I know this from counseling students when I was at DeSales on this topic. Uh, because I grew up in a generation where this wasn't a reality. I'm 65. This was not a reality to me. But so it took some educating for me as I was talking to students to realize, well, this is really a problem for a
Mm.
lot of people. What the thing that struck me almost more than anything was how hidden it was,
Yeah,
and how it led them to leading kind of duplicitous lives. Here's the social me out here interacting with fellow students, interacting with my girlfriends, interacting with my classes, but then there is this dark hidden side of me
yep.
that I hide. So it creates this internal. There's the good me and the bad me that's always playing out in your brain too, in these guilt-inducing tapes, I would assume.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think for me, the tension of wanting to follow Jesus and be a radical disciple, but then struggling with this homosexual thing was just a tension that I couldn't bring into the light. Like I felt so much shame about that. So keeping it in the dark was my way of managing it, but it became unmanageable because my addiction to pornography eventually became acting out with gay prostitutes essentially in Philly. And it really became a point where I was desperate for Jesus because I'm like, I'm starting to lose myself. And I of course feared damnation in my own homosexual exploits, but I also felt it in my body. I felt it in my whole person. Like this isn't good for me. this is diminishing me. There must be more for me, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah,
And so it was there that I was able to surrender to the Lord and kind of be, you know, getting up and starting to become chaste. It wasn't easy stuff, but I also needed good psychological insight into understanding what is this same-sex attraction thing. It has meaning that needs
yeah,
mining, I think. And those
yeah,
became good handles for me of understanding, well, why do I eroticize persons of the same sex? There was something of a father wound in my own family of origin that was important for me to probe. Again, this is my story. This isn't to absolutize everybody's experience of same-sex attraction, but I do think same-sex attraction is emblematic of a psychological wound. I do believe that.
yeah, yeah,
There's real value in going deeper. And I will say, like, being able to look at that father wound, being able to come to grips with that, to forgive my father, to converse with him about it, to talk with my family about it. All of these things have not only opened the mercy of God from the Casanova household, but it's opened ways for me to live a life of freedom in my sexual personhood, you know?
yeah.
So yeah, I needed to hit that ground, that rock bottom in order to get the help that I needed.
This is, yeah. And I think that's true in a lot of counseling situations with people suffering from all kinds of addictions. You almost have to hit rock bottom sometimes before you
Yeah.
can snap out of it. But there are two issues with regard to, the issue of homosexuality that I want to bring up. And one is the pervasive mythology in our society. And here I'm not arguing, like you said, for this thing called conversion therapy or, pray the gay out and all that kind of stuff. But there is a mythology out there that says sexual orientation is an immutable and innate characteristic of who you are, and it is unchangeable. But then in the next breath, you're talking with the sort of LGBT activists. It's LGBTQ plus IAA plus. And you begin to realize when you start talking to them, they start talking about the fluidity of it all.
Right.
All right. You can't really pin me down. I'm pansexual.
Mhm.
My sexuality changes So which is it? Is
Yeah.
it an indelible mark in my soul put there by God and it's immutable? And therefore, any attempt to alter that is cruel and unusual punishment? Or is there truly an open endedness to our various sexual desires? And is it not really what we're talking about here and the whole acronym, a listing of fetishes
Mhm.
that we can actually, yeah, we can change those and we can overcome those. So anyway, maybe am I all wet? What am I? Am I wrong?
I think when we use the word conversion therapy, we have to ask people, what do you mean by that?
Yeah,
Is it any sort of effort? Is it good talk therapy you're talking about with persons who are conflicted about their same-sex attraction, let's say? If that's what you're talking about, I think there needs to be freedom of choice, of therapeutic choice. Honestly, I don't think the whole conversion therapy thing is real. I think it is myth. I think it's a straw man to say any effort to reconcile oneself, to make peace with oneself in their biological sex is sort of demonized in our culture today. And so, I
yeah,
mean, this shock therapy thing, all of that. I think that honestly, if anybody's doing that, like stop going to that therapist. I mean, they're worth their weight in salt. But all
yeah,
these people speak of these stories, but no one's ever brought to justice in them. It's like, where are they? Where are these sort of shock therapeutic
yeah,
therapists? I think conversion therapy is a catch-all term for any sort of effort for someone with SSA to get good therapeutic help. And now it's being branded it's starting to spill out into other areas like the confessional or the catechism. It's like those are
yeah.
conversion therapy. It's ridiculous. And I think we really need to challenge people who use that jargon and say, well, what do you mean by that? And I agree with you. I think there is resolution in through these experiences of same-sex attraction. And to say that someone cannot have therapy to work those things out, I think is an injustice.
Well, I agree, and I think that you've nailed it when you say that this invention of this thing called conversion therapy is simply, I think, an ideologically motivated attempt to say you may not ever tell somebody in any situation, a professional confessional counseling, whatever, that their same-sex attraction might be a problem
Yeah.
that they should try and negotiate and overcome. I once knew a student of mine who was, gay, homosexual, same-sex attracted, pick your title, who said to me that he was actually seeing a counselor, a purely secular counselor, uh, who believed in the whole LGBTQ agenda or whatever, but who also thought it possible to. Let me back up. This young man that I was talking to desired to get married to a woman and have children and to lead a normal sort of family life with kids and so on. And not because he was imbibing the ideology of his oppressor and all that sort of stuff. It's what he genuinely wanted. He wanted that. But he also knew that he was primarily sexually attracted to other men. So he
Mhm.
sought out counseling. How can I learn to fall in love with a woman? How
Mm.
can I learn to have heterosexual relations with a woman so I can have a family and companionship in life in this more quote unquote normal way? In other words, he didn't want to lead a gay life. He
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
And not out of self-loathing or self-hatred. He really saw the good of heterosexual family life, and that's what he wanted. And yet the counselor had to counsel him secretly.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's the landscape right now, you know.
Yeah.
This conversion therapy thing it's really a movement to any sort of good therapeutic help. I mean, for
Yeah.
example, I not long ago I was even at the Catholic Psychotherapy Association, their conference, and I was appalled at how many times conversion therapy was thrown out and with some of the members as if like, oh no, we don't do that. Or instead of like, let's think deeper about this, guys.
Yeah.
Like, on,
Yeah.
can we like not just be of the world here? Like we're good. We're anthropologic, Catholic focused, formed. Like, let's think about that. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
not it's not that outlandish. It's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Like
How can I, as a counselor, a Catholic counselor, help people with same sex attraction negotiate their faith, negotiate living within maybe a different set of sexual parameters than what they're naturally sort of leaning towards? How do you do that? I mean, and there's nothing. So like I said, pray the gay or let's convert you back to Jeebus. I mean, this is really good stuff that these people could potentially be doing, but they're not going to because they're afraid.
I agree. Like, I think just looking, it's basically saying I'm in conflict with these attractions and I want to talk about them. I want to see what's
Yeah,
beneath them. What is the psychogenesis of my same-sex attraction? I know the catechism says that the psychogenesis of homosexuality is largely unknown. And I'm glad it says that because it won't paint everybody's experience of SSA in these sort of categories. But I think what the catechism is giving us permission to do, and also the catechism is staying in its lane. It's not a psychological document. It's giving us permission to go and find out what the psychogenesis of your experience of brokenness may be. It's not to absolutize it even in our own personal stories, but to say
that's right.
helps me understand it, why I do this. That's what it is. That's what it's so helpful. But to sort of brand that as coercive or we're going to throw ourselves over the cliff because of it, it's absolutely ridiculous, you know? So we have to reclaim that. And I'm always urging therapists to be, you know, JP2 TOB centric, like read it and steep in it. You need an anthropology because if you're going to accompany people into no direction, then you're going to do more harm than good.
I agree. So let's, and boy, I agree a lot. And I think that's well said. Let's focus on the sort of nuts and bolts and practical side of one of your meetings. I mean, uh, uh, are your meetings essentially a kind of group talk therapy sort of thing where people get together and share with one another experiences, doubts, struggles, triumphs, that sort of thing?
Good question. I'll take you through a group, and I think it'll give a little bit more of what how we
Because yeah,
do.
there might be somebody listening out there saying, I would like to get involved in
Absolutely.
this group. So maybe give them
Yeah.
some idea of what they're getting into.
So we start always with a little bit of praise and worship. We're mildly charismatic in that regard, and it helps us just focus on the Lord because usually, like people who are coming to the group, we're pretty heavy in our like I'm coming because of my porn addiction or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah.
acclimatizing ourselves to like think outside of ourselves and really praise Jesus is a good way for us to start. So we do that every time that we meet. We meet for 20 weeks. So Living Waters is a closed group. You have to apply to it, and it's 20 weeks and it's built on 20 chapters. And they all build on each other. So it's not just a book club, but it is a curriculum with a direction. So after the worship, we open up into a time of teaching. So a person of the team gives the teaching and tries to give a heartbeat, if you will, to the what is being taught. So for example, chapter 5, it's understanding that we are gifts in our sexual selves. It's very much based in TOB and the understanding of chastity as laid out in the catechism. So what the teacher is hopefully doing is giving you some insight of like, well, where are the frustrations in your own life? Like maybe because of my abuse, I hate the opposite sex. I hate men. Or because of my same sex attraction, I'm allergic or disgusted by the opposite gender or opposite sex. Whatever the case is, it gives
Yeah.
people some handles of, oh, I want to bring that to the Lord tonight. And so we invite people up, we pray for them, but then we go into sex specific small groups, the same small group for the duration of 20 weeks. So you're walking with the same 4 to 5 men or women. And it's there that you're able just to share where you're at and where you need prayer. And then we just pray for you. It's very simple. So it's not advice giving. It's not like, oh, you need to do
Yeah.
this. It's very much let's just offer it to the Lord with you, and hopefully we make some major steps in chastity as we do that over and over again.
And do you adopt like they do in AA, a sort of buddy system where somebody might be paired up with somebody else in case, okay, I'm tempted to head down to the gay bar downtown Philly, pick up a gay prostitute, and I need you to talk me down from this.
So what we do is we actually have an accountability thing built into the program to where there's a group text in every small group. And so the leader leads out with accountability every morning. So you're checking in with the group and you're
Okay.
you're you're identifying something you want to give up and something you want to take up. So for example, for myself, I want to give up pornography, masturbation. Just want to check in that make sure that I steer clear of that. I'm not above that, and I'm not saying I'm addicted, but sometimes the temptation knocks and I like the sound of the knock. So I need to be aware of that. And then secondly, I want to do a daily holy hour. So it's something that I'm doing, but also something that I'm giving up. I'm fasting and I'm also feasting in some way. And we do the check-in every day so that we know as a group, like, how are we doing? Is so and so not doing well? Is so and so in need of special prayer and support? And so when we do meet on that one day a week, we can just kind of check in with each other. And I say that that really helps the guys, especially, and the women too. It's not obligatory for the women because most women aren't coming with sort of that addiction piece. Some do, but not most.
Okay.
It's mainly a men's problem in Living Waters, and every men's group has an accountability. But I really see how that sort of group work really helps men just come into the light with their struggle and able to be known in that, able to receive prayer in that. It's humiliating for us guys. We don't do that. We don't like doing that. Who likes doing that? Like, oh, I need
Yeah.
help. I need prayer. It's like, oh, I want to throw up everywhere just thinking about that. But it helps us. It helps us live in the light, live out
Yeah.
loud with this little confidential community. And it's confidential. You have to sign agreements to come in. You can't leak anything that's shared in the group. It stays in the group. Our secrets are safe there so that it actually helps us like gain more ground. We don't do one-on-one in Living Waters. It's all group work just for the safety of everybody involved because we're all
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
out of our own sexual stuff, and we want it to be a real safe, confidential space for people.
Very good. Do you, I know this is controversial amongst outreach ministries to homosexuals in the
Gosh.
Catholic Church. Do you encourage like chaste friendships between like gay men? Like two gay guys might want to, that okay, we vow ourselves to sexual continence and chastity, but we want to live together. for the sake of holy friendships, gay friends. That you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The gay celibate friendship thing, the committed stuff. Yeah, no. I think it's absolutely absurd. I think what it does, it fosters an unhealthy tie with somebody that you may be romantically involved with. I mean,
Yeah,
I've even read some kind of essays on it, kind of taking a survey of people of how they acclimatize themselves to these gay celibate friendships. And it's ridiculous. You know, some people will say, oh, I'm a little bit more asexual, so I can cuddle or I can kiss with my sort of committed celibate chaste partner. I think all of that is absolutely ridiculous. And I think we just have to steer clear of that and say, well, no, that's codependency and we need to be freed of that. And it's unchaste. Yes, you may not be
yeah.
having sex. I mean, I don't believe that. I think it's a slippery slope. But just because you're not doing the deed doesn't mean it's chaste. You know, it can be emotionally
This is,
unchaste.
I'm so glad to hear you say this because I get flack all the time when I say I oppose even this. Because of that. It is still a sin against chastity. It's sort of a nod in the direction of the idea that unless it's very reductionistic. Unless I'm doing something explicitly bad with my naughty bits, I'm not sinning. I'm not
Right.
doing anything wrong, and yet you are, and you're reaffirming this notion that this is my identity. This is my
Exactly.
density. It's my destiny.
Yep.
This is who I am. It just wrong, wrong,
It's
wrong.
emotional foreplay at best, and I think it's really
Yeah,
dangerous and it stifles becoming for somebody who is struggling through same-sex attraction. Ultimately, it's frustrating for them because, of course, if they're fostering these types of relationships that are semi-erotic, of course they're going to want to go all the way, and that's just frustrating if you're living in this sort of oh, I can't do it, but sometimes we do it, but we're still celibate. It's crazy. And I think
yeah.
it's highly unchaste.
So, how do you respond then? And we're sort of running out of time, but I really want to end with this because I get this a lot too from the other side of things. People who are very pro LGBTQ who are saying, oh, it's all well and good that you've got your highfalutin JP2 anthropology and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what you're telling people is they have to go through life lonely
Mm.
and alone. So, what do you, I'm kind of always sort of at a loss to say, well, no, actually, you don't have you've just condemned every single person in the world to saying they must be by definition lonely and alone, which isn't true. But nevertheless, I mean, loneliness is a horrible thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a terrible thing. So does your ministry talk about how does one deal with loneliness?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that of course is an aspect of it, where
Yeah,
people are afraid, a kind of unwanted singleness in a way, whether that be
yeah,
somebody who struggles with SSA or people who don't. My heart goes out to the women who don't struggle with SSA and who are unwantedly single because no man is pursuing them. I'm like, come on, guys. Even the guys with SSA who I'm so proud of so many of them in our world who are making major steps, who actually love pursuing women. It doesn't mean that they're not going to struggle at times, but they've gained enough wherewithal and healing to actually pursue a woman and to
yeah,
secure a marriage. It's like incredible. So I think that to sort of resign ourselves to say, well, I'm going to be a committed Catholic and I'm struggling with SSA. So therefore I have to deal with loneliness. I would say, well, don't check out into that too early. Let's kind of work on the other stuff. Let's work on how to be a good
yeah,
friend to people of the same sex, to people of the opposite sex. And then if there is unwanted singleness that comes along, okay, well, we're going to help you through that. But who knows? Don't put a cap on your integration of what that looks like because you may be called to marriage and you don't even know, or you may be called to celibacy for the kingdom of God and living with a community of sisters or brothers or something. But I think all of
yeah.
that necessitates deep
Well,
work,
and
integration.
and life is complex, right? I mean, we have to stop essentializing certain things. So, for example, the idea that if you're married, you're never going to be lonely is absurd.
Yes.
And the idea that if you're married, you're never going to go through periods of celibacy is absurd.
Yes,
you
exactly.
know?
Exactly. It's about maturing, I think. It's about calibrating our worldview into what does it look like to be a mature expression of the gift. And that means I need to be faithful when life is frustrating or when life is a great feast. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to mature through some things here, you know. And maybe the little disappointments are helping me mature through something that the Lord is bringing me
Yeah.
into.
I ended a podcast the other day with my friend Cale Zeldin. And after everything we were talking about, we said, well, kind of what our message boils down to is this: don't be a jerk, you know, just don't be a jerk. Or as we said, don't be an asshole. Sorry. So he came up with a Latin for that, but I forget what it was to be the
Oh, that's
motto.
awesome.
And the reason why I repeat it here now today is because we can come up with all kinds of highfalutin conversations and this, that is it. But simple human tenderness and kindness,
Yeah,
simple human mercy and compassion is about 90% of what we need to do, right?
man. Yep. I agree. And I think helping people to know that Jesus has more for them, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
I mean, that's why he died. I love the encyclical Veritatis Splendor. I think it's so robust in its expression of the Paschal mystery and how Jesus wants to appropriate that power into our own individual lives. I don't think we actually understand the depths of that, obviously, but we have yet to probe it even. So when people are sort of down and really heavy in their stuff, I get it, but Jesus always has more for us. So I just
That's
believe
right.
it.
The evermore, the
The ever
expansive universe of love into which we are called. As
Amen.
St. Paul said, eye has not seen nor has ear heard what God has in store for us, and
Amen.
how true that is. And it is our job to live that and bear witness to it. So nobody's ever lonely and no one's ever a stranger. So God bless you in your work, Marco. I'm glad to make your acquaintance. Maybe we can have another conversation down the road.
I
I'm
love
heading
it.
off to Rome in a few days.
Praying for you,
Uh,
Larry. That's a big deal.
yeah, I keep telling everyone that I'm going to be in Rome, and people, people say, "Oh, I'll pray for you." You don't need to pray for me. It's fun. All right, so yeah, I'm going. It's a
Have a
working
bowl of
trip.
pasta carbonara for me, would you?
Yeah, exactly. It's a working trip. I am going to be writing every day, and yeah, it's there are going to be elements of it that are cruciform and burdensome,
Mm.
but the cruciformity consists in the fact that I'm going to want to be at Piazza Navona, Piazza
Yeah.
del Rotundo, having carbonara when I have to sit in an apartment and crank out articles, or I have to go and meet a synod participant and talk about the synod with them when all I want to be doing is having a Negroni over a good pasta. But anyway, uh,
Hey, can I
going
just
to.
say a word about this book? I think
Oh
it's an
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
thing.
yeah. 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 Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Let's
No, no,
hold
no,
it up.
no, no worries at all. I just I'm so pleased and honored to be a part of this compilation. It's called Lived Experience in the Search for Truth, Revisiting Catholic Sexual Morality. It's a compilation edited by Deborah Savage and Robert Fastigi, and it's just a really great some great writers. I'm definitely not the greatest in here, but it what I wrote about was coming out of male homosexuality and how the teachings of the church empowered me to do that. We wanted this to be out in time for the synod, so it's just right in the brink
Hot
of
off the press. Repeat the
hot off
title:
the
Lived
press,
Experience and the Search for Truth.
revisiting
It,
Catholic sexual morality. So if you are a part of the synod, you're a bishop, or I don't know, this is an important podcast. If you're listening, read this book because it's threaded with real life experiences of how the church's perennial teachings of what it means to be human actually freed us in our experience of sexuality.
oh, amen. And I don't know Deborah Savage, but I do know Bob Festigi, and he's an excellent, excellent theologian. Really, really
Deborah's
good guy.
wonderful. She's out at Steubenville, but she's amazing. So grateful for her.
Yeah, and I've known, I've read Bob Festigi stuff for years, and so if they're the editors, it's in good hands. So yeah, so everybody should get that just in time for the synod on synod, the big meeting on meetings. Oh, geez, don't get me started. All right,
That's for another podcast.
that different podcast. Hey, Marco, thanks for coming on the show. We'll have to do this again. It was fun,
Likewise. Thank you so much.
and thanks everyone for listening. Bye now.